Hello everyone, batching into today's first video, doing the February 2020 monthly forecast of today's first video. So we're going to have a look at CFS-V2 and Beijing Climate Centre to see what they're both showing for February, and then we'll issue Bugazob's forecast. We'll give a sneak peek at the end video for March, and we're going to do our best to evaluate the January forecast. However, there's very little finalised data to go on so far for January. We're still waiting for everything to be updated at UK Met, including the CET and also the UK-wide temperature and precipitation anomalies. I assume they'll get those updated later on today, probably just the weekend that's held things up. But we've got to get on with the forecast, of course, for February, because we're already 3 days in. So we'll do our best to evaluate the January forecast anyway. So I'll get on with all of that for you in a moment. Just to say that the second video update coming up later on this afternoon will be your regular week to 10-day video update with all of the usual features. So first of all, the January forecast. So we predicted a significantly milder than average month with temperature anomalies between around 1 and 2 degrees above the 81 to 2010 average. And we also said that it was likely to be quite an unsettled month. Wettest conditions in the north and west, driest conditions in the south and southeast, all areas quite unsettled, possibly highlighting the latter part of the month for anything a little bit colder, really. So this is how the CET looks provisional. So this is not finalised. This is all we can go on so far. Just the CET coming in or coming in provisionally at 6.5 up to the 31st of January, 2.7 degrees above 61 to 1990 average, which set against 81 to 2010 probably brings it in just over a couple of degrees above average. So on the temperature side of things, I think that would be relatively representative of the rest of the country as well. So I think on the temperature side of things, obviously we have had a very mild January. That side of the forecast went well, possibly a little bit milder than we anticipated, but we did say it was likely to be a very mild January indeed. Wasn't totally ruling out the chance of having our mildest January on record. I don't think we did that. Certainly didn't for the CET. I don't think we did that UK-wide either. But certainly a very significantly milder than average month, and we predicted that. Precipitation-wise, again, very difficult to say about the finalised climate averages for rainfall, about finalised rainfall averages. I think quite an unsettled month overall, but not as unsettled as the months before. So October, November, December were significantly unsettled. I think it's a little bit less unsettled than that, but still changeable, still Atlantic-driven. Probably wettest in northern west parts of the country with this Atlantic-driven pattern as well. So I think overall the January forecast went quite well. And again, we are sort of generalising here because we haven't got any finalised data. As soon as we get that finalised data, we will bring it to you in another video, of course. But I think overall the January forecast went quite well. We did go a little bit drier in the second half of the month as well, particularly through the third week. We did highlight the chance of something a bit drier and colder later. We thought probably the fourth week most likely for that. Actually, it happened in the third week. But we did get a slightly drier and colder interlude. So I think overall, not a bad forecast for January. I'm quite happy with how the January forecast played out. Right, so let's move on to February, and this is how the CFS-V2 is forecasting the 700 millibar height anomaly for February 2020, and it's a continuation of a pattern throughout winter, really. Has deep low pressure up to the north and the west of the country. It has a strong Azores high just at there, middle of the Atlantic, ridging into southern, southwestern parts of Europe. You've got a strong jet stream coming across the Atlantic. I mean, it's all very, very Atlantic-driven, low pressure dominated, low pressure driving in from off the Atlantic Ocean. And just really a continuation of the overall sort of Atlantic-driven or westerly low-pressure dominated pattern that we've been in throughout this throughout this winter. So the westerlies continue for February with the CFS V2. That means that the temperature anomaly, of course, comes out milder than averages. The air is still driving in from off the warm ocean. So yes, the temperature anomaly is significantly above average in all parts of Europe. We're actually one of the cooler places in Europe, us and Ireland. So particularly Scotland and Ireland, not all that far from average. For England and Wales, we're still in those red colours. But the reds go even deeper, and they go towards those sort of brownie type colours across much of northern and eastern Europe. That's even warmer temperature anomaly. So our temperature anomaly is being forecast for England and Wales being around a degree to 2 degrees above average and close to average Scotland and Ireland. It's a milder than average month and Atlantic driven, and of course with this kind of pattern it's also going to be quite wet as well, so significantly wetter than average for February, maybe even wetter than January was in some ways. So a mild, wet, Atlantic-driven, low-pressure dominated month being forecast by the CFS. And this is how the Beijing Climate Centre 500 millibar height anomaly is looking for the next month. So this takes us from the 6th of February through to the 6th of March, actually. So it takes just into the beginning of March. It covers most of February. Of course, February is a slightly shorter month, although we do get an extra day for this particular February. So we have above average heights sitting to our south. We have the below average heights out to the north and west. We look at Atlantic driven. The only difference is that with higher pressure to our south compared to the CFS, we possibly have a little bit more ridging into some parts of the country, so perhaps not quite as unsettled with the Beijing Climate Centre compared to the CFS. They are both Atlantic driven, they're both going to be mild and average, they're both going to be quite unsettled, but I think out of the two, the Beijing Climate Centre is possibly the driest scenario, particularly so for more southern parts of the country. Temperature anomalies with Beijing Climate Centre are milder than average, going for above average temperature anomalies of around 1 to 2 degrees above average again. So another mild month coming up really to finish off this exceptionally mild winter, and a little bit above average with rainfall. You see, it's not as wet as the CFS is showing. So it's just a little bit above average, kind of like 20% of average, 20% above average, I suppose, 120% of average, if you like, for precipitation. So they're both unsettled and changeable, but out of the two, the CFS is definitely the most unsettled. I don't see any reason to sort of deviate from what these models are showing. I think again, we're likely to have an Atlantic-driven month, as nothing has really happened to change pattern. If we had something like a sudden stratospheric warming, then we could probably think about the pattern changing for February. But as it is, nothing really has changed in the broad overall setup of the teleconnections. So I think we just go for another Atlantic-driven, mild, wet, and quite unsettled month. Of course, there will be subtle variations as the month goes on. So I think we probably get a drier interlude in the next few days, then perhaps go rather stormy running up to the middle part of February. We'll get a stormier interlude then. And then the second half of February, if we're going to get any cold weather, similar to what we were saying for January, if we're going to get any cold weather, you know, appreciably cold from the north or from the east, then I think it will be again most likely in the last week to 10 days, probably the last week. But there's not really much sign of it within any of the model output at the moment, and I think the chance of getting a significant outbreak of cold from the north or the east at any point this February is quite low, it's very low. But if it did happen, it would happen late on in the month, I suspect. But I'm not anticipating that to happen. We're probably just going to a drier interlude, I would have thought, more anticyclonic interlude in the last week to 10 days of the month. That may encompass colder weather in the form of frost, maybe some freezing fog. But then again, if the sun's out by day in late February, the sun will start having quite a dramatic effect on the temperature. So maybe we go into a period of you know, sort of mildish sort of days with plenty of sunshine, but cold nights. That's something that could happen in the last week to 10 days of February, taking us out of the stormier weather through the middle part of the month. But I don't think that high pressure is going to be able. It will probably try to push northwards to Scandinavia or into northern latitudes. But I think the jet stream will remain too strong to allow that to happen. So we'll just finish up with high pressure centred somewhere across western and central parts of Europe. I would have thought is most likely, with an outside chance that we might get something a bit more interesting. But again, without some sort of fundamental change, like a southern stratospheric one, to really force the issue, it's very difficult to see how any sort of northern blocking is going to be sustained in this month. So I think overall we're just saying another mild than average month. Temperature knowledge again probably around 1 degree to 2 degrees above average. Probably not quite as mild as January. I think January is going to turn out to be the mildest month of this winter. February will probably be a little bit colder than January was. But all in all, a mild and average month again. And probably for precipitation, average to a little bit above. There will be drier interlude, especially early and late in the month. Probably quite a stormy spell through the middle part of the month. Not as wet as it was through the early part of winter, though. Not as wet as it was sort of back into December and into the autumn. And as far as March is concerned, this is how the CFS is forecasting March. So it's 700 millibar high dominantly for March. And it goes on. So even into the first month of the spring, we keep high pressure centred to the south, as it has been throughout winter. Low pressure remains anchored around Greenland and Iceland in the North Atlantic. There's west-southwesterlies, and on it goes. We just have another Atlantic-driven westerly and low pressure dominated month. Probably quite unsettled. And by the time you get through to March, those westerlies to average are probably not as dramatically mild as they are in the middle part of the winter. So that will probably only produce slightly above average temperature anomalies for March. But anyway, we shall worry about March when we get to it. Coming back to February, so we're going for another milder than average month. Quite significantly so, again, probably around 1 degree, 2 degrees above average, although probably not as mild as January was. Atlantic-driven, westerlies in control, and we're saying that's going to be quite an unsettled month as well, but there will be drier interludes. Always most unsettled in the north and west, again, always driest in the south and southeast, and not as wet as it was earlier in the winter. If there is going to be any cold weather, it probably happens late in the month. And by that I'm talking about proper cold from the north or from the east. If it happens, it will be late in the month, but it's not expected or anticipated. Probably just going into a drier period late in the month, and made with overnight frost, but relatively mild days offsetting that. Right, that's it for the February forecast, and of course we'll evaluate this when we get through to the beginning of March. As soon as we get those averages for January through at the UK Met, we will bring you all of that data in another video, so you'll be able to see exactly what happened during January. Hopefully they'll get that updated later on today or tomorrow. And we're going to be back later on with your week to 10-day video update with all of the regular features, so come back for that then. That's all for now though, and thanks for watching.